Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Can you tell me who you are and where you come from?
My name is Nasrin and I come from East Africa, Kenya. It's been a very long time since I came here. I came here in 68 December.
Who did you live there with?
I lived with my parents. When we came here, we were in Mombasa. I'll go back a little bit and I'll tell you that I was born in Nairobi and we lived with my uncle, Mataya, my grandfather, and Taya's children. But then before my father got married, a year late, before that he had lost his brother. So his 5 children and his wife lived there as well. So that was quite a full household. But after some years she left to live somewhere else with her children. And the second Taya, who had again 4 or 5 children, he was living with us. That was before I was born. His wife died. So my mother was newly married, but she had responsibility for 5 children plus, and the smallest child was a year old, plus her own husband, her father-in-law, and her brother-in-law. So she really didn't have when I was born, 2 years after, the little girl, my cousin, was 2-year-old when I was born. Mom didn't have very much time for me because there was so much else to do. And at that time we had tenant who had come from Pakistan and were living in the outhouse, and she didn't have any children. So she used to spend a lot of time with me, and she would really look after me really well. Yeah. So the childhood in that sense was really great because I had cousins who were 10-year-old, 8-year-old, and 2-year-old. But then there were 2 boys in between. One was the eldest one was 8 years older than me, and then the second boy was 5 years older than me. So they were all older, and I was just a baby. So they helped looking after me. So in that sense, that was quite a great situation for Mum and for myself, I suppose.
What can you remember about school?
Unfortunately, well, I was very young. I've had few accidents. So at 3, I burnt myself. I walked into the frying pan and burnt my leg.
At what age
About
did this happen?
3, 4. I was very young then. So I remember I was in bandages for a long time, so being picked up, I didn't walk because my foot, I still have the mark on there because of that. And then there was an airport quite near our house, and we had a large garden around the house with lots of trees, I remember. And then next to us was a big orchard. So there was a lot of playing grounds, so I never went out of those safe places. Once my cousins were going out, I was about 6 then, and I wanted to go with them. And they took me. It was across the road to the airport to see the planes landing. But after we'd seen all that, they'd forgotten I was with them, and they came home, left me there. Unfortunately, while trying to cross the road, I had an accident, and I was quite badly damaged, especially my back, because my frock had gone round the wheel and just pulled me with the car. So those 2 big incidents in my life have brought me very close to the family. My Taya's, my cousins and my father and uncle spent a lot of time with me during those difficult times for me. They really did spend a lot of time. Dad used to come and carry me on his back. He would climb up to the rooftops so that I could see the world going by. And Mataya would actually help me climb up the trees so that we could sit there and watch the world and pick up the fruits, you know, as I was getting better. In a lot of ways, I had misfortunes, but I had a very good life. I had a very loving family. And on top of that, uncle, you know, Mataya, my father, the attendants, he was a carpenter. And he was a young carpenter with a wife. And he used to make sure that every time he made something, he would show it to me first. Oh. I would be on his shoulders examining it as a young child, it's a 5-6 years old child. And he would always ask me, what do you think of it? It was a lovely time. It was a lovely time.
Do you feel as though you was restricted with the things that you could do because of the incidents that had happened to you?
Well, obviously, that's why the men of the family made sure they carried me around.
Yeah.
And they, played with me. I couldn't play with the others, so they played with me individually.
Wow.
They spent a lot of time with me individually, I must say. But my father was in the army all this time. He was not a sort of a soldier as such, but he had given up that as I was born, and he became army worker, but in the offices. So he was doing office work then. And when I was about 5, 6, 7 years old, he left that job. He became a stenographer after that. He was an army stenographer. He used to work in the court, typing. So he did few other jobs after that. After he left that, he did other jobs. And then we had to move to Mombasa because of the job again. It was difficult times, some very, very difficult times.
What was difficult?
Because Dad had lost job, and without a job there, it's very difficult to live. There's no money coming in from in any way. And by this time, my uncle had remarried. So he did have a wife who was looking after the children, but the children were very fond of Mom, still very fond of Mom. But the thing is, when you don't have finances, life becomes quite difficult. So Dad moved to Mombasa to try and find a job, and then he found a job there, and then we moved. But he didn't stick to it because he didn't like the jobs, because he was very used to office works. I was 7 years old when we moved to Mombasa, and we lived in different places. My grandparents, my mother's parents, have already moved there, and they had car showrooms and garages there. So they were working in there quite a lot. So we used to spend a lot of time with them as well. So started school, proper school, when I went to Mombasa. I did go to school in Nairobi, but then started proper primary school in Mombasa.
What was that like?
I loved it. I enjoyed it. I used to walk from home to school when in primary. It was a mixed school, so we used to have a lot of boys group. We go together. But we are only 7 years old. We started school a bit later than we did here. So yeah. So it was, my khala was in the school as well. So there were relatives in the school. It wasn't just myself, so I did have a good time. Yes.
What can you remember the most about being at school, primary school?
I loved playing. I was a good football netball player. So I was in the school team for netball, for rounders, and for hockey. So I loved sports of all sorts, so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed playing we had very open relationships with the boys as well. Parents were there when we were playing, and we didn't have this knowledge about sex and things. We were very, I think, naive in that time. And the most thing I remember is going through the jungles, walking through, picking up fruits. then having a dip in the sea before getting home, and drying the clothes. We would dry before we get home. Would sit on the beach to dry before we get home. But yeah, as you get older, as I got older, things improved. I was the eldest of the 7, but I was doing my O levels at that time, because obviously the times we did here were not the same as in Africa. Africa, we started school a bit late, so we did our O levels at 18, not at 16 that we did it here. But I also missed 1 year in between, coming from Mombasa to Nairobi, settling down, yeah. But when
How
I'm
many of
talking
your own
about
siblings?
yeah, I've got 6 other siblings. I'm the eldest one, then I've got another sister, and then 2 brothers. Now there is 2 and 2.5 years difference between the 4 of us. So we are not very close together. But then after the 4 of us, there is 7 years difference between the 4th and the 5th one. Or is it 5 years difference? I think 5 years difference. And then there's 5 years difference between the 5th and the 6th one.
Mashallah.
And the similar thing with the 6th and 7th. But, so it's a big gap, and there's a big differences, yeah. Because when my youngest sister, in fact, when my 3rd sister was born, I remember her very well, because that is the day my father actually got a proper job that he wanted. He was offered a job at the harbour as a harbour master. So yeah, that's where the improvement in our life financially became really apparent. So yeah, I remember her birth very nice. All of us, most of them were born home. But the youngest child and myself, there's 18 years difference. That's a big difference between her and me. So Mum hardly knew her, and I learned new skills with her coming.
What can you tell me about your grandparents?
I remember my grandfather, who was a very tall. When you're young, you know, maybe that's why you feel this, but he was over 6 foot. And my grandmother was only 4'11", so it was a big difference, yeah. My grandfather had a garage. He used to work in garage and car showrooms. So we would have lovely cars in the family. When Nanaji used to come, Nanaji's name was Ghulam Hussain, and his one son used to work with him. Majid used to work with him, and the other one was in post office, and the 4th one was with my father on the harbour. So there was a huge family. My mother is one of 12. She's the eldest of 12. She's got 5 sisters and 6 brothers. So huge family, big family. But the sisters were married. A few of the sisters were married. One was married in Kampala. The other one was married and went to Nakuru. So she had other sisters at home. And one of her sisters is younger than me. Yeah, Mum's one youngest sister is younger than me, 1 year younger than me. So sometimes Mum would say, I'm her sister as well. Yeah.
What can you tell me about your grandmother and her name?
Grandmom's name is Alam Bibi. Yeah, and I've seen her father as well. So he used to travel between Pakistan and Kenya quite a bit. He had properties in Pakistan, and he had lived in Africa, but then moved back to Pakistan. They were from Lahore, so moved back there. Yeah. I don't remember a great deal about him, except like that she was always busy with lots of people around her. A very gentle woman, and like I said, small woman, always busy, always busy with people around her. So I had more sort of to do with my khalas, one or two of my khalas, because they had left school earlier. I don't think they studied beyond the 11th year, even the last one. So she used to read quite a lot of Urdu novels. I didn't even learn Urdu, but she used to, and I would sit and listen to her while she read, and spent a lot of time with her, climbing up the trees. They were not as open as there was a different. Mum was from a very orthodox family. Dad was from a very open family.
What was it like being the eldest of all the siblings?
I had a lot of responsibility. Being the eldest, my father wanted to make sure that I was very independent, and I actually thought about what I was doing. So lots of parents would scold the children if they spoke back. My father made me stand there and answer him back. And I would say, why do you want it? Because he said, I want to know the reason. And if you don't know the reason, then why did you do it? So he was always trying to educate me by example. And he would explain everything. He would never say to us, don't do these things. And no reason for it. If he said to us, don't do something, that meant he would also tell us why he wanted us not to do it. And that was my education where, and being the eldest, like I said, there is a response because he didn't like saying anything to the children. He used to say, you tell them. Why would I say to them? So because they will understand you better. If I say, I will explain it to them, but I would like you to actually speak to them more about it. So I would have to talk to my brothers and sisters about something they did wrong. So
that was from quite a young age you had to do that?
Oh, at 11 he made me decide. It was 11 when I did 11 plus. My exam results were not as good as he wanted to get into the grammar school. So he said, it's your choice. You want to study or you want to stay at home? And if you want to study, you will have to find a school. It will take you for a year to do to this 11 plus and move on to the grammar school. If you do that, that's fine. I'll pay the fee. So I had to find a school that would take me.
Wow.
And then go for the interview with my father to be accepted there. And I did a year there and then moved to the Coast Girls School. So Dad put responsibility on me from a very young age, but he felt that for a girl, because Mum wasn't educated, he actually taught her to write Urdu and write, because she'd never been to school. So he was in favor of women learning in a big way, because he said women are the educators of children. They stay at home. If they're not educated, then the children don't learn as well, because they are the one who are helping them with that education. Men cannot help as much, but where in our family my dad had to do all that.
What can you tell me? Can you tell me a little bit more about your parents and how they met and what their personalities are like?
I don't think
names.
they met before. My father's name is Muhammad Abdur Rashid, and Mom's name is Zubaida Begum. Like I said, Dad was in the army when they got engaged, and Dad was 7 years older than Mom, 6.5 years older than Mom. And because he was on the army, there was objection, that he's in the army, because he used to travel a lot and all sorts. So when they got married, he, changed his job within the army, and he became a stenographer. So he, instead of being a soldier, he became a office worker in the army. Dad was a very serious man. He would talk to you very well. People respected him so much, but he would never go in anywhere unless he actually coughed to make people know that he's coming or he's around. And then people would react in very different manners. I used to laugh at my cousins because they would all run for their dupattas. And I would say, why? He never tells you anything, so why are you doing it? He said, that's the problem, he never tells. That's why we are afraid of him, you know. So even in the street, people would really be like that, respect him as, you know, knew that he was coming. Everybody was inside running in. And he was so good with children. He used to love playing with children. Yeah, Dad was very serious but very wise man. His philosophy, he was very religious as well, but he didn't take religion in orthodox way. My mother used to wear burqa in Kenya because all her sisters wore burqas in Kenya as well. And when he married her, because she was wearing burqa, he said, it's your choice. If you want to carry on with burqa, you carry on. Otherwise, you can not wear it. He taught her to drive. But she had an accident, and that was it. She never drove after that. But she also went to art school. She would paint on material and on mirrors. She's a very handy woman with her hands. She learns the crafts very quickly. She enjoys. She used to do embroidery of all sorts. She made all our clothes, and it was. She enjoyed those things. I think when people were free in those countries, they sat down and did embroidery. They did something together, and that was craft. And because the houses were in such a way, we had verandas around the houses, but then we had an inner veranda. So the house was L shape, one side. The kitchen was across from the L shape on one side, and then the servant quarter were behind that, and then gardens around the two sides, and because one side was orchards, so that, yeah. So it was a very, very open life, and something that we won't stop from doing that. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know, I remember I had long hair when I went to Mombasa. So did Parveen. Both my sister, myself, we had very long hair. We used to have plaits in Nairobi. But when we went to Mombasa, the climate was very, very hot there. So my dad got our hats really short. And I mean, I was 7 and she was 5. Mm-hmm. So quite big thing there for having, But he was a man who would not entertain anything too shiny that we're wearing, very simple clothing. He was very religious, and he followed the religious principles very strongly. Yeah. So that went, I did my O-levels there, but then he told me to wait for my sister to finish her O-levels because 2 years between us. She was going to finish it after a year I had finished, and then we were going to come here to study. But the same year they got independence in Africa, and in that independence he had, I think, decided to stay there, but there was an incident that took place which suddenly changed his mind. We used to go fishing every evening.
Where was that?
In Mombasa. In the evening.
Can you remember the lake where you went fishing?
Pardon?
Can you remember the name of the lake where you used to go fishing? No, we didn't.
It wasn't a lake, it was sea.
Sea, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, Mombasa is an island joined to the mainland with the sea around it. So it was the sea we used to go. He used to come after work, children in the car, and we would go to Lighthouse, it was called. Either you would just walk, he would fish, and we would just play around. Or we could go to different beaches, and we would play and swim and do our homework there while he was fishing, you know. But he was also very fond of fishing overnight. He would go with big friends and they would go big fishing. That means big fish coming home, you know. And so it would be distributed within the neighbors and we would all sit down. And the neighbors were all sort of not just Muslims, they were Hindus, they were Sikhs. And we would all get together. Like I remember we had a tandoor. And one, you know, there was a Hindu family next to us. It was our family, Hindu family and Muslim family on the top. But we would all make rotiyan together there in one tandoor. So, you know, it was not like, oh, Hindu, we won't have it like that. No, nothing like that. And they were very good friends as well. You know, families were friends as well. So, yeah, it was a lovely time, I think. We really did have a good time. But Dad had more strict rulings of Islam and how to behave and how to do, because he didn't allow me to wear a burqa. I remember when Khala started wearing burqa, I mean, I said to him, I want to wear it as well, and he asked me why. I said, because we're all wearing it, Khala is wearing it, and I said, no, that's not good enough reason. I want to know the reason why you won't wear it. So he said, go and do some research and then come back and we'll talk about it. And Mom was wearing burqa, so I said, why, you know, I thought you would like me to wear it. He said, no, I don't. I won't tell you to wear it. If you want to wear it, we'll talk about it, but well, not straight away. You go and think about it. And I remember going back and thinking about it and talking to my friends about it, because I was 16 at that time. And then when, you know, Dad said, are you ready to talk about it? I said, well, I don't really know, but I'll tell you my reasons why I want it. And he said, that's not good enough reason, because I said, Islamically, you are supposed to be covering yourself. And he said, no, where does it say? I need to know where it says that. Obviously, I had no answer to that. And he said to me, do you know what parda is? Parda is of your eyes and of your heart. And is to make sure you do not misbehave and look at anybody else in that niyat. If you have that, I would rather you have that than you had a burqa on. So I wouldn't like you to wear a burqa. Right? That's okay. Because he explained things. He never just said, don't do it, I don't want you to do it, that's it. He always said why he didn't want us to do it. And then he made us think about it. You know, he would make you think about why you want to do something. He didn't like us wearing anything that would be showy, anything that people would turn around to look at you, anything shiny. Even on Eid, we would wear churiya, and the next day they would be taken off. And surma, I started wearing when I was about 16 years old.
What can you tell me about them and life with them?
Well, we had only one servant who would do our cleaning, ironing, washing, because Mum did all the cooking and food-wise, she did everything. But other work he did. Like they would be there, we had one who would be there for 5 days a week, he would have 1 day off. And Dad used to make sure that we learned to do our own jobs that day. I was very naughty, I must say. I used to pay him extra a day before to just do my work for me. Dad used to really get angry with me. But there were certain jobs I used to enjoy. I used to love polishing the floor, making sure that, you know, and we had to learn to cook anyway, you know, we had to learn to cook. And the house jobs, you know, I used to love doing, when my younger sister was born, because there's 18 years difference. First I hated the idea, and then I loved having her around, so I learned to sew. because of her, so that I could make her something new every day to walk with me. When she started walking, especially, started walking when she was 9 months.
Wow.
So it was great to, and in the heat, you can have the child in lovely, beautiful little frocks and matching shoes. And I would then take her walk with me, in walks, so that was my initiative to learn sewing and learn, a different craft completely. So I learned sewing fully in my own clothes and everybody else's clothes as well.
Did Mum teach you how to sew?
No, I went to school to actually learn sewing. It's easier to do that than to learn it from your parents. Mum did, you would always fall back on her because she knew she was very good sewer herself. So you could fall back and say, how do you do that? But I went to learn from somebody else because I wanted to learn how to do sari blouses, which are really a speciality. Not many people did them. So I learned to sew this sari blouses, my own clothes, the child's clothes. Fun.
Your time was kept very busy looking after your siblings and learning new skills like cooking and sewing. Did you do anything else in your spare time?
We did have a lot of good times. We did, like I said, we went out. As a family, we went out. Because we were in Mombasa, we used to have lots of people coming, because anybody who was going to India, Pakistan would come and stay with us from Nairobi, from Uganda. Somebody got married, they would come for the honeymoons to Mombasa, so that means we would be spending a lot of time taking them out. Any young, families, they would come and stay. So we were very busy in that sense. We had lots of people coming and staying with us and going out, but we would go to Nairobi for our holidays.
Did you have family?
Pardon?
Did you have family in Kampala and Nairobi?
Well, Tayaji used to be in Nairobi, still in the same house that we were in. Then he moved from Pangani, Section 3, I think we were in. He moved then to Parkland Road. His in-laws were very rich people. They were the people who had zoo, and the Queen has come and stayed there. We've got photographs of them. So we had a lot of other interest in that sense within the family. So the children were quite happy going and playing in the zoo and being in the parks. With obviously with my uncles were with me. Mataya was very he was a very calm person. He was a very jolly person. He would be always laughing and joking. He would be joking to the point, he would do things like make a cake and put chilies on one side. He was a very good cook, and put some chilies in one corner. And whoever got that would be, and he would say, "What? Why are you doing that?" So the cake. So he would be joking, practical joker he was. Yeah, he was a practical joker. Oh, used to love it. He used to really love it. And I mean, the idea of us going out, my dad was quite strict about us going out. And yet when we used to go to Nairobi, Tayaji would say, and he would say to my dad, "I'm taking them to their friends. I'll drop them and I'll pick them up. And I'll take them to dinner as well." But instead, he would actually drop us to a film, because my dad didn't like us going to a film. He would drop us to a film. After we'd seen it, he would pick us up. He would take us to a dinner, then bring us up and say we'd been to the friends. But he would ask the friends if they want to come with us. So we would be together and we would say it. He was real fun. He really, really was fun. And it's funny because we didn't sort of hide things. We would tell him, what is what. Mathaya's elder son was 8 years older than me, so we really had fun as well with the children playing. And the other expectation, I think, in the family is somebody marrying each other. as well. I think that expectations are there sometimes, but it didn't happen. So, and we moved here.
You mentioned the Queen visiting.
The Queen, or is it Queen Mother? I'm not
Queen
very
Mother,
sure,
yeah.
but it was one of them visiting Kenya. When they visited Kenya, they visited them as well. Yeah. So there is a picture in the gardens. Yeah, somewhere. We actually have recently looked at it. That's why I just came back, because I was in London with my cousins, and it was his mother's side of it. And we were looking at some photographs, and I said, Najib, where is this, Shafiq? And he says, oh, this is the gardens, you know, that's the, and I said, but this is the, I think Queen Mother or Queen. Said, yes, they must have visited at that time. We weren't told about it that much afterwards. Nobody spoke about it too that much, except for seeing that, you know, suddenly, yeah. Like your father's father was Dad's far cousin. He was his son's. So and they used to live in Eldoret, which is again another town or city. And we would go there regularly for holidays.
What was that like?
And again, like most of the towns were not all very well developed. The ones that were even developed had a lot of open lands around them. The house, I remember very well, had a lot of fig trees. And any trees I would climb up, any tree. And I used to call him, I think, Dadaji, and so he would say, Bete jaake la, subah subah la ke liya, asto ke khane. And he would cut it for me, and I would sit and eat there. You know, mangoes were growing in our own houses. We would climb up, and jammu. Oh, jammus were so much jammus. Oh, I used to love eating them. But then anar and amrut, all those fruits just growing in your houses. But Tayaji also had chickens and rabbits, and he would really look after them so much. I remember him giving garlic to the chickens. He would hold and put it in the mouth. I've also have goats as my pet.
Wow.
And they usually bring it when they are still feeding. Something has happened to the mother, and so you're looking after the kid. So you're also feeding the, bottle feeding the kid. So yeah, it really been fun. And even when Nanaji, who was very strict, was also fun loving. I mean, he would take us out in the evenings. We would go and eat out, or have halwa and coffee out, or go and have boko boko. Boko boko was a special Arabic food, which we used to love to go and eat. So he would take us, and he would take, the whole family would go. We would go in family, full big cars, and really enjoy it. Life was fun, I think, because maybe the weather, and also not as many restrictions, plus having the finances to do all that makes a difference, because poor families were very poor.
You mentioned that your father went through a phase when he wasn't working. How did you financially cope with no governmental help?
Well, for 5-6 years, I can remember Mum cutting her own clothes, because wedding clothes, and making clothes for us. I have made lots of clothes from Mum's shalwars and for myself as a young girl. Wow. So, and otherwise, I think the Mum had to sell all her jewelry to survive, and then her parents helped, and my Tayaji helped a lot. Taya Amin was really great in that. He used to send regularly some money over, He was, strong arm in need. You know, that there was a time that I would faint because my tonsils were so bad I couldn't breathe. And we couldn't afford to have the operation. And Matthias sent the money for my operation. And I remember that journey where my father took me to the hospital. He said to me, nobody will come to see you because it's a long way from the house. Bus fare, nobody, we won't be able to afford that bus fare to come and see you. You might be there for 2 days or 3 days. But be very patient. Eat what they gave you and try not to think too much about being alone.
How old was you?
I was about 9. I was 9, 5. Yasmin hadn't been born yet, so I was about 8, 9 years old. And he's telling me all that. And he's also telling me why they wouldn't be able to come. I still get emotional with that. And he took me there. I had the operation, and I was there for 2 days without anybody coming to see me or anything. And then I think some friends so Mum's friend, they used to live near the hospital. They must have told them, so they came to see me the second day. And then third day, I remember Dad coming to pick me up and take me home. If you don't work in those countries, that's how difficult it becomes. Yeah. So you used to get 2 dresses a year for 2 Eids, and then you would get 1 uniform for school. That was it.
Wow.
And you think of clothes then. I definitely didn't. It's too much in play and other things. Yeah.
Wow. What can you tell me about the environment in Nairobi and Mombasa, the food and the people and the music?
I mean, we used to love going into the farmhouses. People, when you're going for picnics, people would go to farmhouses, people would go to their bars, and we would cook there. We would get together, lots of people, cook there. And anybody who came, for example, their bar between Mombasa and Nairobi, whoever traveled would always stop there. And there would be digs of food going on there. Right. So people would come, eat. They didn't have to, somebody would just make it regularly. You just gave them the stuff and they made it. Or I was very young, so I didn't know very much about that. All I know is we enjoyed it. We just enjoyed running around because the most of around that was all open land. You could, when you traveled from Mombasa to Nairobi or Nairobi to Mombasa, you would see the wild animals. You would stop on the way, like hot springs. You would stop there, have a little bath, and then go on. And then the lives, used to amaze me because when I was 7, we were traveling from Nairobi to Mombasa. And on the way, we stopped at a village and the women were naked. They only had a little grass skirt on. And I was told by my father, don't be so rude. Don't stare at them. That's their way of living. That's how they dress up. So do not be rude and look at them. But it was just fascinating as a child to see suddenly you are all dressed up and somebody is just in little grass skirts. So yeah, they're quite amazing to see that sort of bit of it. And then animals, you would see elephants, you would see giraffes, you would see, you wouldn't see lions as much, but sometimes you would even see lions. But all the other sort of animals, deer, they were so common. You actually stopped for them to pass. Wow. Because there were grasslands all across. Really beautiful. There was some, as you went from Nairobi outside, there were lots of beautiful places, the crater, the valley, the Rift Valley, and Nakuru. There were really a lot of places where you would go just for picnics, just to look around, just to have fun, and it would be mostly families getting together and going. All the family children would go. Yeah. So I remember before we came to Mombasa, Zadi had taken us to a park, and we stayed there so long it started becoming dark, because it gets dark very quickly in Africa. It's not like here. It takes ages. And my brother at that time was about 1 year old. We were just four of us, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and the youngest brother was about 1 year old. We lost him. We could not find him, and it was getting darker, and we were going to leave next day to come to Mombasa. Oh, it was absolute havoc. And then somebody suggested, my mamus I think suggested we should put it on radio, and I was a bit worried that if my brother hears it, he'll get very upset about it. But they did go and report it to the police, and then we managed to get him. But somebody had picked him up and taken him home, and he was quietly enjoying food there and to pick him up. But they told the police that we picked a child, and so there was always something happening. There was always something happening, yeah. In that time, food-wise, it was all Asian food. We would have curries, we would have dry fruit, fruits, a lot of fruits. But then we were not making it. I mean, I wasn't making it that much. Very little. I remember in the morning sometimes mostly it would be paronta or paronta and anda, or paronta and something else, yeah. So lunchtime we would come, food would be ready, then again it would be similar things, meat or curry and roti or chawal or something like that. But I didn't like eating our servants' food, because they used to make special ugali. They would have the same salan, but they would make their own added thing to dip in to eat it, or they would make it like little bowls and they put them in, and I didn't like that. Well, I would sit with them and eat, no problem. Dad was very strict about them, that we would not give them our leftover plate food at all. They had to have from the dishes, put them aside. And he used to always say they're human beings. They're working for us because they need the money. So respect that. They are here without their families. They have come from the villages and they come here to work, not to be insulted by us. So he would make it very clear to us that they might be workers, but they were not there to be insulted or to spoken to very loudly even. He used to get really angry about that. So in lots of ways we had a good life. There was a taste of bad life, when I say bad life, it was just difficult life, not bad life in that time, because we had my grandparents who used to be helping all the time. And with my grandparents, my grandfather used to love bringing hundreds of mangoes, fruits in hundreds. And he would get the whole family to sit and eat as much as you like.
What was Eid like?
Eid was new dresses, new clothes. Before Eid, we would be doing mehndi, really all again, not individual families. Families would gather. And it wasn't just the Muslim families, the Hindu families would come as well. Their children would be part of our families. Like that, and that was the reason Dad was he would make us learn the language. He would say, if you want to talk to that child, you must be able to talk to their parents. So we were made to understand so Gujarati, Punjabi, Hindi, Kutchi, we had to learn to speak that to be able to speak to the parents.
So from a young age, you was very bilingual then?
Yeah, you had to, you had to, because your friends were speaking different languages. And he was also the person who would say, investigate. Like he didn't mind us going to the Gurdwara. What's happening there? Go and see. He always used to say, don't not make up your mind by what other people are telling you. Go and investigate, find out, and then make up your mind about something. So we would go to Gurdwara, play around, have their food, see them doing their prayers. We would go to the temple as well, not just the Gurdwara, we would go to temple as well. We would go mostly for playing and seeing what is happening. It did give you an insight as to why your parents didn't want you to do what they were doing. So in that sense, he taught us by example, and he taught us by experience. He would say, go and experience it. We've been to church before I was 11, 12. I'd been to church, I'd been to temple, I'd been to Gurdwara. And there were not many restrictions I came and saw restrictions here with our Asian families that I had never experienced in my country or with my family. There might have been with others, I don't know. You can only know what has been happening with you. We were coming back from one of these fishing trips, and on the way back home we were stopped. And Dad just got out to see why we were stopped, and the police actually hit Dad. He slapped him for getting out of the car. And that was it. Within 2 weeks, he had sold everything, and we were on our way here. Because I was 18, the rest of them were all British citizens, but because I was 18, I had become a Kenyan citizen. So I had to get a Kenyan passport to get here. So that was a bit of wait, but he knew that it's going to be very cold here. He had decided to go to Kuwait first, but I think he was rejected for some reason, for whatever reason, I don't know. Then he tried Pakistan, and Pakistan didn't want us. So he decided to come here, as he was going to send me, Parveen and myself here to study. He decided, okay, I'm taking all my children, I'm going to England. But can you imagine coming from a place which is warm? We never seen coats, we have never seen sweaters or chadars or anything like that. We would have to change twice a day. It was that hot. We used to come from school, lunchtime we would have a shower and change and then go back to school and then come from there. So it was pretty hot there. You needed to get used to it. I suppose you used to get used to it. Different way of life completely. Then we had servants at home.
What can you tell me about your life when you had to come to UK?
Right, I came to UK when I was about 18 and a half. And we came from a very hot country, so finding the right clothes to come even to this country at that time was difficult. I remember my dad saying to me, "Better for once in your life, do as I'm telling you, and make clothes the same color, because I can't find the right colors." Because he bought suit materials, men's suit material, warm ones, so that we could make clothes out of that to be warm. And then he bought coats from the army ladies, because once they got there, they don't need it. So he bought coats for all of us, mom, all of the children. And, I made our clothes. And it was either grey or blue, So the blues was for the younger one, and I made grey for myself or my sister. And we wore that to come to this country. And when we came to this country, I remember when we arrived, it was evening, late evening, and it was cold. It was really cold. We had never come across that cold. and went through the customs. They wanted to ask lots of questions, and they were quite amazed about our English, and they wanted to know why we'd come here, and we had come to study. So that was a bonus. And then my uncle, who is about two years older than me, Taf, came to pick us up from London. And we traveled, and I remember asking him, are we still in London? It had been few hours, and he said it's not like Africa where you go out of the city and then grassland or forest starts. They are just houses and the same houses, no difference. But it was all white, literally all white. There was so much snow, I just cannot believe it. And then when we came to Castleton.
Can you remember the year?
Yes, we came on the 19th of 1968. So that was December, 19th of December, 1968. It was bad. I tell you, snow-wise, it was bad. We came to this 2-bedroom house with 3 men there already living in the 2-bedroom, and then the whole family living, whole family having to live. We had struggled going out because, again, toilet was outside.
Where did you live? Sorry, can you tell us?
We came when we came. They used to live in Castleton, and that's where we lived.
Was it a family friend's house that you lived at?
No, my uncle's house.
Your uncle's house.
Yeah,
okay.
My uncle's house. But there were 2 other uncles, so 3 uncles were living in one house, and there were just 2 bedrooms. One of them was married, with his wife there as well. So he had one room, and the 7, 8, 9 of us had the other room, and the downstairs living room used to be used by my other 2 uncles. So we went to school. Dad put the others in school within very short period of being here, 2 weeks. I remember we went different, but I was then not sure what I wanted to do. I'd come to do teaching, but then suddenly decided I don't know whether I want to do teaching or not. It was all very different because every day we went out, we had to first clean the snow from the path before we could go out. Plus we fell so many times.
Oh dear.
We used to fall, and we used to have our trousers torn, and we used to come home every day and fight with my father. Why have you brought us here? We want to go back. But he bought the house very quickly. But like I said, the house we all liked. He got gazumped that day. Somebody else offered more and bought it. And he said, I'm not going home without a house. So he bought what he thought would be a good family house. It was 4 stories and two rooms on each stories. Yeah, so 2 rooms up there, 2 bedrooms right on the top, then 2 rooms, which was one sitting room and a dining room, then 2 rooms, and then the basement was kitchen and a big room. So cleaning, that house was dirty. According to us, it was dirty. And in winter, we didn't know how to decorate or clean because we'd never done it. None of us had ever done it. So we cleaned it with water and brush and soap. We didn't know that wasn't the right way to do it because the wood and the water was going right down. And it froze the house. When Dad would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to put the fire on, there was one toilet outside, and Dad had the coal shed turned into the bath. We did have hot water there, I must say, if nothing else. Did have hot water there, and proper bath. We had a bath put in.
Outside? In
the shed. That shed was made into a room. And the toilet outside as well, but we had to go outside the house to go into these 2 places. Can you imagine? Oh, it was difficult. But then Dad bought Mom a washing machine a week later. So, but that washing machine also had to do handwork.
Oh,
because you had to take it out of the tub and then rinse it round the bowl,
wow.
then put it in another one. Poor mom, she had really hard time doing that. But that house was fun. We had really a lot of fun in that. But we did have quite good time, but we also had quite bad time because clothes were not right. We didn't have really warm clothes. I had to learn to make sweaters. I learned knitting then. That's when I learned knitting. And I remember my first cardigan that I made was blue and white. And one side was longer than the other. And my dad, I said, well, that's not worth it. Just throw it. And said, my dad said, no, you have worked really hard on it.
Yeah.
Just sort it out and wear it. It's really good, so wear it. And I then made all my siblings sweaters.
Wow.
Really, so we bought some from here. We could buy them, so we bought and did it. But I did all my sewing. I used to wear trousers, like they used to call drain pipes at that time, and tunics at college as well. So yeah, I remember I went to college in January, but then in the summer when the college was ending, they all went to pub. And I didn't know what pub was then, did I? I just went with them. And I was so shocked. And I came back from the pub and sat in the lecture room and started crying. I just started crying and thought, what hell has my father brought us into? What sort of people are these? There was no respect of teachers, and they were behaving in the same way as the students were behaving. One of my teachers, who was a Scottish man, he came and sat and talked to me. And he said he didn't drink. He said, that's why I don't go, because I don't drink. But then he explains about a bit of culture and everything. And I think it did help. But I was so shocked. And I just started crying, came back to the college and started crying. But then after that, you start accepting, yes, there are things that you don't do, but others do. And it's okay for them to do it because they think differently than you do. So it's not as bad as I think it is. But then where we were living, they were all English. There was just one other Asian house, Dane Street, just one other Asian. Their children would come and play, but they would not even look at us, and they wouldn't even come into our houses because they said we smelled of garlic and ginger. They would close their doors and windows.
Is this the neighbours?
Yeah. But their children would come into the house and be with me quite a lot, because I had a sister then who was a year old. So I used to have her and all the children, and many a times the children would sleep in the house and the parents had to come, fathers used to have to come and pick them up.
And how was their
attitude to us? Wasn't too bad. They just ignored us. Literally, they just did ignore us.
How did that make you feel?
Wasn't too
Considering-
bothered
No?
because at the college I was really well respected, so to me that didn't bother me much, and I was too busy to be bothered about it, because the children did come to my house and they had to come to my house to pick them up. So one foot up. Yeah, no, it didn't bother in lots of ways because we didn't have much time. Because where I was in college, again then, the boys were now wanting to date. Now, we didn't have that, and it was quite difficult to explain to some of them. But one of them, I remember, was insisting that I'll come and ask your dad. So he came home, wanted to go and watch a play. The others were going. So he came home and asked Dad, told him exactly where we were going, what time we will be back. And Dad said, fine. So went with him to see a play in Bolton. We went to Bolton, drama home there, and saw it. So, but the boys then were much different than the boys now. I think their attitude to each other were very different. The whole aspect was very different.
How do you feel it was different?
It was different in respect that they would respect women tremendously in the college itself. But if I was going on bus, I've noticed lots of people would get up and move away from my seat. If I was to sit with them, they would get up and move to another seat. They wouldn't sit with me. And at that time, people used to think I'm a Japanese girl. So I didn't even look Indian, Asian or anything. But even then, there was that prejudice against, people didn't want to sit with you. People didn't want to be seen with you. So that was a big shock. The other shock was at the same year, we used to go to Manchester University medical department to do the drawings. We used to make the charts for the medical students. So when somebody was dissecting, we would draw out what was seen there. And we, like the 5 boys and the 2 girls and my tutor, we went for lunch to the canteen. Now there were 2 boys in front of me. I was in the 3rd one, and then there were 3 behind me. The 2 were behind me. They served the 2 boys in front of me. When it was my turn, they said they wouldn't serve me. That was Manchester University's canteen. And I remember feeling that, I wish the ground would open and take me in. I was so embarrassed of being there at that time. Then I became angry, but thank God my tutor stepped in and the other boys stepped in, and they said, we don't want to be served. The others 2 who had been served, they put their food away as well and walked out. Wow. And we went and had some food outside. But I think that experience really shocked me.
Did you find any cultural differences yourself personally when you was at uni?
Lots of cultural differences. There was things that culturally, I'm not very sure, but religiously, that I wouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And having to explain it to others, that I don't want to do this. I think Oxford with that was okay. I found lots of people were very helpful. This Richard, the boy that I made friends with, was extremely, because he was a psychologist, but he also was finding that I didn't have confidence, and he was always trying to build up my confidence. Oh. So he would take me to places where I would dare not go, thinking, I can't go in there. But he would just say to me, I'll meet you outside, but he wouldn't be outside, he would be inside, so I would have to walk. Mm. The hall where we had meals, he would wait for me, and we would go in together many a times, or many a times I would walk through. And he would always say to me, look, people are looking at you. And I said, that's what upsets me, that people are looking at you. And he said, simply because you look beautiful, not because you're different, it's simply because you're beautiful. And then when we were sitting, he would either drop a knife or a fork, just to get me used to people turning around and looking and not feeling bad about it and feeling ashamed about it. So he built up my confidence in lots of ways, which was really nice. But then again, there were lots of things that you had to explain to people about yourself, why you didn't want to do certain things. Because when I went to university, I decided I'll cook for other people for 6 days and they can feed me for 1 day. That's fine. Each of them then would feed me a day in a week. That was great. Just cooked 1 day for about 6-7 people, and then they would feed me the rest of the week. Loved it. Was an easy, good way of enjoying yourself, because we didn't all have to cook. So we had about 6 of us together, and we cooked 1 day a week. And we would cook it for everybody.
Yeah.
So that is it, your turn done and you're finished with, and then the others are cooking. And they did take care of my diet because they knew I didn't eat meat. And the meat that I ate was Tayaji used to bring me from London, or I would have Jewish kosher meat. If I could find kosher meat, then I would cook that. Otherwise, there was no meat in my diet at all. I realized, I found out from friends from college. I had gone to art college by that time. The group that I was in, we were 5 boys and 2 girls, and they were very friendly. So asked them what to do, sort of they would put me to the right person, go and ask him, he'll tell you what to do. And helped me. I remember one day I got to a point, I said, look boys, I'm really, don't know what to do, I need help, desperately need help. Mom will all make you some dinner if you come and help me. So I took 4 boys home who helped me paint, who showed me how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. They showed me how to take paper off, to put the paint on and everything. And that was at least something, we had done it. And that year went very quickly because we had come here in December. By the time I went to college, it was January. And so January, February, and then little breaks. It was art college, and I was doing a foundation course, really deciding what I wanted to do.
Was that at Rochdale College?
Yeah, it was Rochdale College. At that time, there was another art college, which was in Whitworth.
Okay.
So that was where it was started, but they moved to Rochdale College afterward. Rochdale College was then being built when we came, so then they moved there. But then you forget about it and you move on, you carry on with life. And that year as a student, I did a bit of occupational therapy voluntary work at Fairfield Hospital. And then as the college finished in June, in July I got a job there I became an assistant occupational therapist. But within a year I moved up to the management because the occupational therapist left and I took over that department. I ran that department for 3 years before I got married.
Which age did you get married?
73, June 73. Long time ago. 48 years this year. Yeah. Yeah. So the college life was quite good in that sense. The boys who were with me were very respectful of me. Lots of times they asked questions because I remember once I dropped paint and I just didn't know what to do with it, how to clean it. So I just stood looking there, and I think my tutor was there, and I asked him, I said, what do you do? And he said, come here, I'll show you. So he took me to a cupboard where you could broom and get shovel, broom and cleaning stuff. And he said, he did it that day, and he said, this is how you do it. And because I had never done it before. I'd never sweep the floor or cleaned. So that was a good lesson. But it was by asking. And I think because I was okay to ask, I wasn't ashamed to ask, people were helpful in that sense. But they sort of looked down on you because you couldn't do things or you didn't know how to do them. They found it very strange that I didn't know how to sweep the floor. With that special, they had different sort of brooms than we were used to. So that was a different thing as well. So I had learned all that, and I'd learned to do decorating and everything else. I remember my father laughing at me. He'd say, go and get your servant, call your servant now. Because I remember when cleaning the windows, there were huge windows, my tears used to run down my face, wondering, where are you, Malawi? Come and do the work. Dad used to say, I used to tell you, every Sunday I used to tell you to learn to do these things. But then, you don't. Because you don't think life is going to change. You think it's, hallelujah, just lovely. So you just carry on. But during this time, because we were 7 of us, and Dad had to pay my fees for college and Parveen's school fees, but she went to do A-level, so it was all right. So when we went to university next year, we had to pay fees. So couldn't be afforded, we couldn't afford that. So we applied for scholarships. I did and Parveen did. Both of us got it. We got grants. It was grants from rich people. It wasn't from the council, it was from other people. Okay. So we got the book allowances and living allowances, everything. So I worked at the hospital, but I went to study as well. I went to study occupational therapist. But then I got married in 1973 without finishing, because 71 I went to uni, and then 70 I went to uni, 71, and then I got married. I went to uni in 71 because that full year was, because applying.
What was life like at uni for the brief time you was there?
Uni was quite all right, but then again, lots of new things to learn. Gay societies, found out first time what gay was, and that didn't even know. Even I had started hearing that word, gay and lesbian, but didn't know what they were. But there was one Asian girl from Pakistan on scholarship as well in college, so she became good friend. She was a third year, so she became good friend, and then I made a friend with another third year, who was a psychologist, and he was doing postgraduate 1-year course, and he was from Halifax as well. So that was good friendship, because he would bring me from uni back home, and or I would hitchhike, because otherwise I had to get 2 or 3 trains to get home. We just we would, because there was from Oxford you had to get another train, go somewhere. There were two changes, and that would cost as well. So it was easy to hitchhike, find out from college who was going how far, and then take the lift, and then got dropped off from the main roads, and then you would then hitch back again, another road to certain place and move on. I hitchhiked in Europe.
Wow. When did you go to Europe?
74.
Okay.
Yeah, long time after.
What can you remember about Rochdale when you first came here?
When we came here, Rochdale, we then moved from Dane Street, because when we were in Dane Street, I was in college, which wasn't too far away, and used to take a bus there, which was okay. There weren't many of Asian women around, but there were Asian men around quite a bit. Few of them had houses around, but not many. But then there were lots of things about them that I was puzzled about, and uni boys or girls would ask me questions about, why do the men walk in front and the women back? Why are the women covered and men are not too bothered? Sort of questions I didn't have answers for. I would come home and ask Dad, why do the men walk behind? You never do. Why do they walk in front? So because they don't have patience to slow down a bit. So it wasn't about religion, which most of them thought it was. It was the culture they came from. Because I'd never seen my dad walk in front of my mother. Always saw him walking side by side, and they always went out together. So why were these men not doing that? Because I hadn't seen that in Africa, where men did that. So that was the question I had to ask him. I said, is that religious? He said, no, it isn't. It's just that men don't have patience to be slow enough, because their strides are long. I mean, he explained this. the men's strides are longer than the women's. So if he takes his normal stride, he will go in front. So he has to slow his strides down to match his wife's. Yeah.
And you mentioned you went to live in Europe.
Yes.
How long did you do that
I didn't
for?
go living in Europe. I went, before I got married, my dad sent me to Europe.
Okay. Did you know anybody there?
No.
Wow.
I just went with my uncle, my youngest uncle, and I went with them with, we had caravan. We toured around
Which
Holland,
countries did you go to?
Holland, Belgium, Copenhagen. We went through Germany. But then in 1974, I went with a friend to Europe, and we hitchhiked. We went to Barcelona, and from Barcelona we hitchhiked right around Spain. And we stayed there. We went for 3 weeks. We did hitchhiking all that. We did hitchhiking and trains. So yes, it was lovely. And
Sounds
people were very, very friendly, and they were very accommodating. And we were 2 girls, though. We were just not on my own, but I was with another girl. So yeah, had a lot of fun. With some of them would look upon you. Then again, in 1974, there was more trust between people, more morality. So there was a lot different than it is now. And even at that time, people would take us to their homes, and we would be there for 1 night or 2 nights with their families. And, and then they would drop us somewhere else. Or they were very, very helpful. And mostly we would go out to eat. We didn't want, they had given us accommodation. We didn't want to put on them with the food as well. So yeah, it was really great. Really enjoyed that. But again, I had a father who was very liberating, who was very wise. He had told us from the very beginning, don't trust any man. As a man telling you, don't trust any man. But he was also very understanding. He was very friendly. To me, he was my best friend.
Yeah.
And I could talk to him about anything. And I think Tari can be a voucher for that. That I could talk to him about anything. So I got married in 73, left the country, went back to Kenya. Then in 73, 6 months later on, I got married to my cousin. My uncle died, so I had to come back here.
Okay.
I came back here after he had died, actually, and then I never went back.
What was it like going back to Kenya?
It was very different, again, because I got used to working
Absolutely.
here. I had houseboy, I had a cook, I had a gardener, and I had a driver. So I didn't know what to do with myself.
Wow.
I really didn't know what to do, but my husband asked me to go and study if I wanted to.
How long was you there for?
Just about 7 months.
7 months.
Just about 7 months. Then Taiji died, and then my husband Dwayne, he had a heart attack as well while I was here. He was in intensive care for quite a while. So life went on. Yeah.
So what was life like after you got married? Where did you live?
I went back to Africa. I lived there for 6 months, but unfortunately my father-in-law, who lived in London, died. And at the time he died, he had a son who was 1.5 years old. Taji died very young. He died at 54. And he had, before he died, a day before, he had asked me to come here. He told me that he was going for Hajj and could I come and look after the child. And And I remember my husband told him that my passport had run out. And so I had to apply for a new passport. And he said, get on with it. Said it's only been 6 months since I've been there. And he said, but no, he definitely wants me back here. So next day he died. But I couldn't come because of my passport. So I came 2 weeks afterwards. And I stayed in London till January with my mother-in-law. But by that time, Javed himself had a massive heart attack and was
at a very
intensive
young age
care.
then.
Yes, yeah. He had kidney problems before that. He had kidney stones, both of the kidneys were damaged. So yeah, it was a big shock, but he was in intensive care for a long time. But I never went back. Just never went back. That, just ended there.
And what happened career-wise then after you got married?
After I got married, I did go to college in Nairobi, but then I came here without finishing that course. But when I came back here, Dad was very insisting that I went back and did my studies, completed my studies. When I inquired, I had to do it quite a lot more than where I'd studied and finished. And I decided not to do that, but to go for another course. So I went into community social work. So when I came back here, before I actually had gone to Kenya, I used to work in the community with Mr. Hope, who was a counsellor in Rochdale. So with him, we had set up groups for young girls, but because the mothers wouldn't allow the young girls to come out, we had set up group with mothers and daughters. So one side it would be the mother activity and the other side would be the daughter's activity. And that was in Chapness Hall in Rochdale. I did that for a few years. But then before that, I used to go out and teach English within the community. But I found a lot of resistance from there. The men didn't want their wives to be taught English. Was it after I came back? Yeah, after I came back, yeah, that's what I started doing with Mr. Hope. And Mr. Hope had been really, because he was in India, he knew the culture. He was also, used to come home quite a lot. And we got on, but he also knew that we didn't have the behavior way of, how to understand the English behavior and the culture. So he would tell us about that. He taught me how to eat with fork and knife, because I used to go to his house and that's where I would learn how to eat with fork and knife. And he had one son who was a teacher. So there was, because he introduced me to his own family. So in that sense, I would be able to develop with the culture, understand the culture, and work around that with my own culture. Because my friends were all English, they were Polish. There was one girl, Polish, the others were English. Two of them used to live on Barry Road. One was doctor's daughter, and they were very good. There was Irish couple, extremely nice, taking me in. They would have me in, and sort of what I didn't understand, they would be able to tell it to me. It was like a family. They had taken me in as family because that was the only daughter, and I would go in. So my friends were very useful in that. So I used to horse ride at that time as well. So my friend, she, from the college itself, she used to live in Northern, and that's where we used to go horse riding quite a bit. So it is through friends that I could do all the activities I could do. But then my brothers and myself and Tariq and my brother-in-law, we used to play quite a bit as well. We used to play badminton at Rochester College and tennis, but mostly badminton. Then we used to play squash quite a lot in a club in Ashton. So Tariq would be there as well. I met him at college. So that, he was there, Tariq Nadeem was there, my brothers were there. So there was a group of about 6-7 of us, from someone from Manchester University, the boys, my sister, myself, there were 1 or 2 other girls. So we had a big group of girls and boys. We would go picnicking together, we would go and play together. So at that time, this community didn't like that. There was a lot of...
When you say the community, who do you mean?
I mean the Asian people who were around us. There were few. We had by that time moved from Dane Street to East Street. We moved to East Street in 1970. So just lived there for hardly 1.5 year. 1970, and that was again a big house. But then I learned to do lots of things there. But lots of my friends used to come and help me with it. Mum would make them a meal, and they would help me to paper, to paint. And that was a Victorian house with a big garden. I don't know whether you remember where we lived in East Street. Now there are about 40-50 flats there in that area. The area, Mamu and our house, 2 houses together were ours.
Wow.
And that area has got now about 40-50 flats there.
So it was a big house.
There were 2 big houses. One was ours, and then within short period, my Mamu bought it. The next door house went off sale, and Mamu bought it. And there were few, I remember 3 to 4 Asian Pakistani families on that road. And every time we went out, we would have problems because the men would come out and stand in the doorways. Really used to annoy me like mad. And I had a habit of carrying chilies in my hands. And I would
what
throw
was
that.
the reason for that?
I would throw it in their eyes full of staring.
And did you feel that they did come out just to see yourself? And
yeah, because we were dressed very differently than their wives.
how was you dressed?
We were dressed in like I'm dressed now.
Okay.
Literally.
Trousers and a top.
Trousers and tops, but loose trousers and loose tops, And, they found that amazing or strange, whatever. But then dad was all, stop doing that. This is Pakistan. They're Pakistani, they're not Kenyans, so don't be foolish and do something. So why don't you go from the back, he said to me.
Yeah.
Instead of aggravating them, why don't you just change your way a little bit?
So you felt that there was more animosity from the Pakistani...
Well, the Pakistani community. They didn't accept us. They thought we were more westernized than them, so we were Western. They didn't even think we knew anything much about religion. So the African Asian kept themselves to themselves and didn't mix with the... But my mother was very social, so she was mixing with everybody. She was with everybody. The Pakistani women got to know us. The attitudes changed.
But it took time.
Obviously it takes time, doesn't it, for people to understand. And even there were white people who would not come to our house, but the children would play with in our house. Most of the time. Most of them, they would, weekends, I would be babysitting for them. And they would stay there till the morning. I would tell them, okay, she's asleep, or don't bother with him, he's asleep, so you don't need to pick him up if you don't want to. But if you want to, you can. So some of them would pick it up. And some of them is funny because I don't remember them. But sometimes I'm in Rochdale and, white child is frantically, but how do you recognize me? I've changed so much. So, but there is something about you that is you. I remember you. I remember you from East Street. And they're hugging, they're running out to you. You think, who is this? But when they tell you they're from East Street and I used to babysit for them, you think, oh, really? Do you remember me? I've changed so much.
It's lovely that they can remember
you. But yet people do seem to pick me out from a crowd. They seem to know, yes, I am who I am. And I sometimes get quite surprised about it. So after I came back from Kenya, stayed here, and then in 1976, I traveled in 73, I went away to Europe, and then 74, I went to Canada, and I stayed there for 3 months. I had applied for a job, but again, because of the training and expense of training and staying there while I was training, I decided not to take up that job. Came back here and then decided I wanted to do some community work or social work. So I joined a voluntary services which were paid by the social services. So I worked for Pakistani community within Manchester. And I used to go out into community, assess their needs, provide the assistance for whatever was needed, or guide them to where they could get whatever they wanted. So I worked as a social worker, community worker, for 10 years. But while I was working there, I decided to go and get myself educated or get qualifications for social work. So community workers, I had the qualification, I had already gained that. So I could do that, but then I decided I'll go and do social work. I had already done a few years of occupational therapy, so I knew exactly what the work involved. And and I like change. I don't like to stay in offices. I cannot cope with office work much. So I decided, that community work would suit me greatly. But in Manchester at that time, I used to not just work as community worker, I was working as social worker, I was working as community worker, I was working as translator of different languages from different, I was working with children from schools who were being abused at the time. So there was a variety of work that I was doing. And, it was going very well. But then I had got married again. I started that work in 76. My father died in 79.
In UK?
In UK, yes. A big shock because he was fine one day, the next day he lied down and died. Even the next day he was fine till the time of his death, to the point 5 minutes before that he had asked his daughter to go and get him a blanket and the other daughter to get his get her mother, because he said time is very short, tell your mother to come quickly. Before my mother could come, he had died. So big shock. But at that time I was also doing some work with...
How did he pass away? Sorry to ask you.
The doctors said that it was heart failure.
Heart failure, okay.
Not heart attack, heart failure.
Wow.
Heart had just stopped. So before he died, we were preparing to go for Hajj, himself and me. And he had never been to Pakistan. He had a sister there who he'd not seen since he was 5 years old, and he decided on our way we'll see her and come back. That wasn't to happen. We were going to go in November, September, October. We were supposed to go in October. He died in March. And I remember when I came back and saw him dead, I just couldn't believe it. He looked as if he'd gone to sleep. He was so afraid of mortuary. He didn't want to be in a mortuary, so they didn't put him in a mortuary. We put him in a chapel.
Okay.
So he was actually on a stretcher in a chapel, covered up. And he looked so peaceful, asleep. But I had a sister then who was 11 years old. And he had prepared her so well. He said to her that I'm going to my true home. She wasn't to cry. she was to do these things if she missed him. And that was that. It happened so quickly. And he died on Sunday. He was buried on Tuesday. It was snow. Literally snow all over in March that time. But that changed my life in lots of ways because he was my best friend.
Yeah.
I could talk to him about anything. And suddenly that sport had gone, but my present husband, my father made him become really good friends with me. And when I was really down, he would ask Tariq to help me out by taking me to the moors. Used to paint at that time. So I used to do painting, just on the moors, sit there and paint. So Dad's going really changed because the house that we were in had been sold, but we hadn't found another house. But he had made me buy another house. That was in Middleton, in 2 weeks actually, I bought that house.
Wow.
Tariq, Abaji and myself were the only ones who had seen the house. And I got the key on Friday, he died on Sunday. And he told me when anything happens to him, I had to move into my own house. But because again we were gazumpted twice, he was gazumpted twice. He bought a house on Barry Road. He got gazumpted. The second one, he got gazumpted on Barry Road again. He was heartbroken.
Yeah.
He said, I'm just going to die here. He literally said that to me, I'm going to die here. So he bought again any house that he thought my mom could live in and move. So when he died, we had to move after the 40 days and he had bought a house in Castleton.
Okay.
He used to work in Dunlop. So on his way, he'd seen this house for sale, he just bought it. And didn't do any survey, no nothing. So it didn't even stay for a year. It was demolished because the walls were that bad. So yeah, a sad sort of end to hard work that somebody does. It just leaves very good memories. And I, for months and months, would not believe he had gone. And I felt every time in the evening, I would think that we had buried him alive.
Wow.
Because he didn't look as if he was dead. He looked, after even 3 days, he looked so fresh. And you felt he would get up any minute. Yeah, life really changed because Mom had never done any of the outside work. It was always Dad who was doing it. So suddenly the responsibility of Mom and 6 other children on me. 5 because my sister was already married. So 5 other 2. Now my brothers were not here when Dad died. They used to work. They worked in Edinburgh. Both of them. Before Dad died, Atiq had come home with his wages to give it to him for his Hajj. But he couldn't give it to him. He died before he could do that. So he used that for the funeral. And then he decided not to go back. But then again, when you do that, there is finance problems, isn't it? Because he wasn't working then. The second one who came for the funeral and everything, while going back, he burnt his arm with something had gone wrong with the car, with the engine, and the water burnt it all. And so he couldn't continue with the business either. So the business went bust. So he came down as well. So yeah, it was a difficult time. I had moved to my own house, but they were still in the house Dad bought. Set it up. I was there for a few months after Dad died, and then after the mum's 3 months Iddat was over, then I came to my own house. Yeah, it was quite difficult for mom, very, very difficult for mom and my younger sister, because she was very close to dad. Like, he was a good best friend of mine, he was best friend, his best friend, our best friend. And I think it was difficult, but yet he had trained her, he had put her in the right frame of mind to say to her that I'm going to my true home. So don't be upset about it. You should be glad that I'm allowed back into my own home. And you will have to be without me. And so he had really thought about it, about his death, and prepared the one child he thought might need him most, and he had prepared me in lots of ways. But what can you do? Life ends at a certain time. And he was only 56.
Very young.
And mum was only 50. She had just, in February she was 50, and he died in March. So for her it was very, very difficult. Yeah. And I think then everybody else decides how they want to move and do things, don't they? So life just moves on. And then by that time I had become social worker. And I was still working in Manchester, but I'd got married as well. And in 84, I had a child. I stopped working then. But then mum had moved in with me now. By this time, mum they didn't live in the house that bought them for more than 7 months. They decided to move in with me, which was quite a shock, because you have to rethink about your life completely. You're living in 3-bedroom house on your own. Suddenly you've got 7, 8 other people there. How do you do? What do you do? So the priorities have to change completely. And when they moved with me, my brother got married as well. So another person is added to it. So yeah, life wasn't that easy.
How long did your siblings and your mother live with you for?
7 years.
Okay, mashallah.
They lived with me till 1985.
Okay.
From 1979.
And I know now they've moved on into their own homes now.
Well, yeah, they moved in 75 into their own homes. No, Pfizer was one already, yeah, so 75 they moved into the house they're in now, yeah.
What can you tell me about life now?
Well, life changes as we get older. Not just life changes, I think things around you change. Life now is I'm retired.
What do you like to do in your spare time now?
I do quite a lot of things. Like I've done this room myself. I've decorated and painted the house downstairs mostly. I do quite a lot of things around. I sew, I knit, I do jewelry making. I'm a counselor, so I offer free services whenever I find there is a need. So that's all I do now.
So you still keep
But I still used to go and see my mother. Even though since they moved, I only till recently, now that I can't go because of COVID, I've always been to see her every day.
Yeah.
Except for the weekends, because my other sister or my nieces always go and see her at those times. But till now, I've always been going to see my mother regularly on everyday basis. So,
what do you feel is your biggest achievement?
Achievement in life? I really don't know about my biggest achievement, but I think I've achieved a lot. I've traveled the world. I went last year at my 70th birthday to walk for about 48, 50 miles walk
That's amazing.
over 3 days. This is from Najaf to Kaaba Sharif.
Alhamdulillah.
So that was my biggest achievement, that I could do that at that age. But I had very good friends with me. I really enjoyed it. But last year before that, I went to Iran. So I love traveling, and I do travel that a lot. And I enjoy learning about other cultures. I enjoy being with different peoples. So, I don't know whether that's an achievement, but
Of course it is, yeah.
that's really what I enjoy, and I do that, quite happily. And I do go alone, but I find friends. And some of the ones that I made in Iraq, I've still got them.
That's wonderful.
And then some I made in Iran. I do still have small communication with them.
And if you had the opportunity to live in any country in the world, which one would it be and why?
I love going to Cyprus, but because I like the countryside and the heat. So Cyprus was lovely. I've been going to Cyprus now for about 14 years. Because I've got a place there, I can go and stay there for a few months. But now I don't like Cyprus because there were farmlands around me. Now it's all buildings.
Okay.
I'm only about 10 minutes from the sea, but it has lost that charm. It has lost that ethnicity as well, but it's lost that charm, that that openness.
Yeah.
It's no longer the Cyprus I knew. So, yeah. Now I'm thinking about Greek islands, some of the Greek islands, it would be, or even I've looked at Libya.
Would you live back in Kenya?
I don't think so. Because when I went back to Kenya in 1996 with my daughter, the fear people had, I remember the car broke down around 12 o'clock at night because I was staying out of the town. I was staying on a farmland. So it was completely, and the men were in panic. After living in the country for so long, I find this country the best of all because it looks after its old, its disabled, its widows. And I admire the government who have taken on so many Islamic rules, and the Islamic countries have dropped them. And that's why I love this country.
Do you have any final words for our listeners, or what you'd like them to remember about this interview?
Well, for them to remember that life is short, to enjoy every bit of it. And I have. I've gone through very difficult times in my life, but I have enjoyed it. I've learned from those things. Those difficult times don't just come for fun. They're there to teach us something. And if we take something out of it, that's a big gain. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you.